The air was thick with tension as the crowd gathered in the grand hall of the royal palace. Whispers filled the room, each one a ripple of anticipation. At the center of it all, the new king stood, his hands outstretched. The people had come from far and wide, some limping, others coughing, all of them hoping for a miracle. This was the day when the king's touch, said to have the power to heal the sick, would be bestowed upon them. Among the crowd was a young girl, no more than 12 years old, whose neck was swollen with the marks of scrofula, a disease that had plagued her for years. Her mother held her hand tightly, urging her to be brave. The girl's eyes, wide with fear and hope, darted from the king to the other sick people around her. She had heard the stories of the king's touch, how it could heal even the most debilitating illnesses, but could it really work? The king, a tall and regal figure, moved through the crowd with a calm and deliberate grace. His hands, smooth and unblemished, were the hands of a healer. As he approached the girl, she felt a sudden rush of warmth. The king placed his hand on her neck, and for a moment everything seemed to stand still. The pain in her neck began to fade, and a sense of peace washed over her. The crowd gasped in awe as the swelling on her neck visibly reduced, the marks fading into her skin. But the king's touch was not just a matter of healing. It was a symbol of power, of divinity. The people believed that the king was a representative of God on earth, and his hands carried a sacred energy that could cleanse and purify. For centuries, monarchs had used this power to bind their people to them, to show that they were more than just rulers, they were saviors. As the girl's mother thanked the king, tears streaming down her face, the king nodded and moved on to the next person in line. The hall was a sea of hands, each one reaching out, each one hoping for a touch that could change their lives. But the power of the king's hands went beyond healing. In the courts and in the halls of power, the handshake was a gesture of trust, of loyalty. When a man swore fealty to his king, it was not just the words he spoke that mattered, but the act of clasping hands that sealed the bond. This was a tradition that had roots in the ancient past, where the touch of a king could mean the difference between life and death. In the religious world, the power of the hand was just as important. Monks in the monasteries of Cluny, a powerful order in France, had developed a complex system of hand signals to communicate in their silent environments. These signals were not just a way to convey simple messages. They were a form of prayer, a way to connect with the divine. The sign of a dish of vegetables, the sign of a squid, the sign of the Holy Virgin, each gesture had a deeper meaning, a way to express the unspoken. Even in everyday life, the power of the hand was evident. In the marketplaces, traders used hand signals to haggle over prices, a silent language that allowed them to communicate without breaking the noise of the crowd. In the courts, witnesses placed their hands on holy books to swear their testimony, a physical act that gave weight to their words. In marriages, the clasping of hands was a symbol of union, a promise that would last a lifetime. The hand, in all its forms, was a tool of transformation. It could heal, bind, and communicate in ways that words alone could never achieve. And in the Middle Ages, when the world was a place of mystery and magic, the power of the hand was a force to be reckoned with. As the young girl and her mother left the palace, the girl's neck now clear and pain-free, they walked away not just with a healing, but with a new understanding. The king's touch was more than just a gesture, it was a bridge between the human and the divine, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was a touch that could bring light. In the Middle Ages, digestion was seen as a process that involved 3 main stages, each taking place in a different part of the body. The journey started in the belly, where the food you ate was broken down, and the waste or fecal matter was separated out. What was left was a pale, white liquid called chyle. This chyle then moved to the liver, where it was heated up, similar to how bread is baked or wine ferments. This heating process turned the chyle into blood and other bodily fluids, known as humors. Finally, these humors were circulated throughout the body by the heart, reaching every part of the body and providing it with the necessary nutrients and energy. In medieval times, what you didn't eat was just as important as what you did. Religious laws, like the Jewish laws of kashrut or the Islamic rules for halal food, helped people feel connected to their communities through what they ate. Fasting or going without food was seen as a way to get closer to God. For women who often had limited roles in religious life, fasting was one of the few ways they could connect with their faith. In Christianity, fasting was a big part of monastic life. Monks and nuns would often skip meals to focus on spiritual thoughts instead of earthly pleasures. This was a way for them to show their devotion and control over their bodies. For nuns who were often restricted in other ways, fasting was a powerful way to take charge of their lives. Some nuns, like Margaret of Hungary, fasted so much that she became very thin and pale. Instead of being seen as unhealthy, her extreme devotion made her a saint soon after she died. Another famous example is Colette of Corbie, who fasted from a young age and often went into deep spiritual states instead of eating. People believed that her kiss could heal the sick. One of the most extreme stories is that of Mary of Egypt, who lived as a hermit in the desert for 47 years, fasting so much that she became extremely thin. She was often shown in art with long, wild hair and a very thin body, but this was seen as a sign of her deep faith. In Paris in 1475, a strange event took place that shows how people were fascinated by the inside of the body. A man who was supposed to be hanged was instead used by doctors to study his internal organs. They cut him open, looked at his insides, and then sewed him back up. To everyone's surprise, he recovered and was even given money for his trouble. This kind of thing was very unusual, as most people in medieval France were not comfortable with cutting open bodies. People were also very curious about what the inside of the body looked like. A book from Paris in the 1300s had a drawing of a person's internal organs, with doctors pointing and looking amazed. This shows how much people wanted to understand the body's inner workings. The Royal Abbey of Maubuisson, near Paris, had a unique tradition. When important royal figures died, their bodies were split, and their entrails were buried separately. This was believed to help their souls in the afterlife. The abbey had special tombs for these entrails, and even 300 years later, some of these remains were found to be perfectly preserved, which was seen as a miracle. The stomach and gut were not always viewed positively. They were considered the third most important part of the body, after the head and the chest. Digestion could sometimes go wrong, leading to embarrassing issues like vomiting. In one Old Norse story, a hero named Egil was so upset by bad hospitality that he threw up on his host's face, covering him in vomit. Even worse than the stomach was the very bottom part of the body, which included the genitals and the anus. This area was often the subject of jokes and humor. For example, an Anglo-Saxon riddle plays with the word anus, culus in Latin, and eye, oculus in Latin to make a pun. This shows that medieval humor could be clever, not just crude. These stories show how the medieval world saw the body, both in terms of religious devotion and everyday life. The body was a complex thing, full of spiritual and physical significance. In the Middle Ages, the human body, and especially the bottom, was a mix of humor and seriousness. Take Roland the Farter, for example, who was part of King Henry II's court. Roland was famous for his unique talent. He could jump, whistle, and fart all at once, entertaining the royal family and earning a good paycheck for his efforts. But it wasn't just about laughs. Even the wealthy and powerful, like Count René of Anjou, enjoyed more complex forms of entertainment that poked fun at the bottom. In 1476, a play called The Farce of the Fart was performed for Count René. It featured a woman named Jehanette, who farted so much that her husband Hubert took her to court. The play not only made fun of flatulence, but also satirized the legal system, showing how lawyers and judges could make a big deal out of trivial matters. The bottom wasn't just a source of laughs. It was also a serious matter for healers. John Ardern, a surgeon from the 14th century, became famous for his innovative treatment of anal fistulas. Fistulas are painful and dangerous infections that can form in the body, especially in the anal area. Before Ardern, many patients died from these conditions because the treatments were often too aggressive and poorly managed. Ardern's method involved carefully cutting into the fistula, cleaning it, and then dressing it, which significantly increased survival rates. He even wrote books with step-by-step illustrations showing how to perform the surgery, which was a first in medieval medicine. These books not only helped other surgeons, but also made Ardern a wealthy and respected figure. The bottom, with its contradictory nature, was a site of both serious medical treatment and carnivalesque humor. This duality is evident in the way medieval people viewed the entire digestive system, from the stomach to the intestines. It was a place of scatalogical fascination and medical innovation, where the most embarrassing parts of the body could be the focus of life-saving procedures. Moving on to the genitals, the medieval view of the human body was deeply influenced by religious and medical beliefs. One of the most intriguing examples is the Shrine Madonna, a type of sculpture that could be opened to reveal a hidden world inside. These sculptures, often of the Virgin Mary and the baby Jesus, were not just static religious icons. They could be opened to show a detailed and elaborate interior, with scenes from the lives of Christ and Mary, and even a central carving of God the Father. This transformation from a calm, serene exterior to a vibrant, detailed interior was a powerful symbol of the virgin birth, where Mary's body was seen as a sacred vessel for the divine. Medieval thinkers, especially men, had complex ideas about the female body and reproduction. They believed that the male and female sex organs were mirror images of each other, with the female organs being inverted versions of the male. However, this symmetry was often used to emphasize the differences between the sexes. For example, the male body was seen as more active and robust, while the female body was considered more passive and internal. The process of conception was explained using metaphors, such as the idea that male sperm acted like a carpenter on the wood of menstrual blood to create a fetus. Even more mundanely, some compared conception to making cheese, where the male sperm acted as a clotting agent on the female milk. Despite these scientific and religious explanations, the medieval understanding of the female body was often rooted in a belief in its inferiority. Women were thought to be biologically weaker and colder than men, and their only way to balance their humors was through menstruation. This belief had real consequences, affecting how women were treated in society and medicine. The Shrine Madonna, with its intricate interior, serves as a metaphor for the medieval understanding of the female body. It shows a world of complexity and divinity hidden within, much like the medieval view of the womb, as a sacred and intricate place where life was created. This duality of the body being both a source of humor and a site of profound religious and medical significance reflects the complex and often contradictory nature of medieval life. In the medieval world, the mysteries of women's bodies were often the center of attention. Men in the medical field were especially intrigued by the menstrual cycle, seeing it as a key to understanding women's health, personality, and even morality. They believed that the color, texture, and frequency of menstrual blood could reveal a lot about a woman. For example, a woman with reddish, heavy menses was seen as prudent and chaste, while one with a bluer, heavier flow was thought to be inconsistent and better off without a husband. These ideas weren't just from men. Even some women, like Hildegard of Bingen, a famous 12th century author, wrote about how the body and mind were connected. Hildegard described different types of people based on their bodily fluids, or humors. For men, she ranked them from the strongest, with reddish skin and fiery blood, to the weakest, with pale skin and weak veins. For women, she focused on menstrual blood, suggesting that the flow and color could predict a woman's character, from having a good memory to being sluggish in the mind. However, these theories were not always based on careful observation. Sometimes, they were used to justify prejudice and fear. For instance, there were beliefs that menstrual blood could turn bronze black, ruin crops, or even drive animals mad. Some texts even claimed that a woman's gaze could transfer her feminine traits to men, almost like a curse. Despite these strange ideas, there was a genuine fascination with the female body, especially the womb. Medieval illustrations in medical books often showed detailed images of the womb and the positions of unborn babies. These images, while not always accurate, were part of a long tradition of trying to understand the process of childbirth. However, these expensive books were probably not used by actual midwives, who relied more on practical experience. Midwives, the women who helped with births, were crucial during this time. They used a mix of practical knowledge and folk remedies. For example, some believed that carrying a goat's womb or a special stone could prevent pregnancy. When it came to uterine suffocation, a condition where the womb was thought to rise up in the body, midwives used both practical and magical methods. They might burn feathers to create bad smells to drive the womb back down, or use sweet-smelling herbs to attract it back to its place. The church also played a role in childbirth, especially in the spiritual well-being of the mother and child. They were concerned about the fate of children who didn't survive birth, and midwives were sometimes called to perform emergency baptisms. This was a serious matter, as childbirth was extremely dangerous, and many women and infants did not survive. Despite the risks, the birth of a child was a joyous event. New mothers were often celebrated with gifts and elaborate birthing trays, called discai do parto. These trays were beautifully painted and often depicted scenes of the birthing process, showing the mother in bed, surrounded by helpers and visitors. The trays were a way to wish the mother and child good health, and to celebrate the event. In the end, the world of medieval childbirth was a blend of science, superstition, and community. The stories and images from this time give us a glimpse into a world where women's bodies were both revered and misunderstood, where the act of giving birth was a mix of danger and celebration. This history reminds us of the complex and often challenging journey of understanding the human body, and how far we've come in our knowledge and care.